No one ever knew what I hid inside that stained apron. The war took many men, but only one ever called me my love. And to this day, no one imagines what he left with me, or what he took when he left. My name is Nora Ellen Whitmore. I'm 91 years old, and I live alone in an old trailer on the edge of the Appalachians, where silence hits the walls louder than any TV ever could. I still sew with tired hands, and I talk to the wind when it blows like it used to. During the war, I was a nurse. I stitched more skin than cloth. I cared for hundreds, but only one left a scar on the inside. I never told this part of the story to anyone. The part where I was secretly loved. The part where love had no place, no chance to show up, no chance to survive. But it happened. And now, with time crawling slow inside my skin, I think someone ought to know. Come sit here with me, sweetheart. Take a deep breath. Just like that. This story isn't easy to tell, but the silence has grown heavy in my bones. And today, I need to share it. If my voice shakes halfway through, listen anyway, will you? Because some truths only an old, tired woman can speak gently. And if this story touches something in you, if it reminds you of someone you loved, lost, or waited for, subscribe to the channel, leave a little kindness with a like, and share it with someone who still carries memories no one ever heard. Sometimes what we need most is for someone to finally listen. You know, some days the wind comes through this window like it knows exactly where it hurts. It drags the smell of wet earth, slips past the worn-out curtain, and rests right here, across my lap. It's always on cloudy afternoons that my mind gets the loudest. We grow old thinking we'll forget, that time softens everything, but it doesn't. It just settles, like a sheet folded too many times, with creases that never come out. Sometimes, even with the TV hissing in the background, I hear it again. That sound, the sound of boots, marching down the narrow hallway of the infirmary, like a war drum pounding inside my chest. It was the rhythm of urgency, of youth on the brink of dying. Muddy, heavy boots, and hearts beating faster than footsteps. No matter how many years have passed, that sound still visits me, always visits me. I must have been 19, maybe 20. Straight from the Appalachians, with a slow drawl and calloused hands from scrubbing clothes by the river. No one prepared me for what I saw. No one ever does. You learn by surviving. You learn to stitch flesh like it's fabric, to hide fear behind a steady smile, to be strong even when your soul's already in pieces. I became one of those forgotten heroines without even noticing. One of those women who held the world together with thread, gauze, and silence. Every morning smelled like blood and ether. That's what woke me up, before the watery coffee at the mess hall. The field hospital was close to the front line, so there wasn't even time to breathe between one scream and the next. And me, I cared for them, one by one, like stitching wounds could somehow keep the war from winning on the inside. Because war, it doesn't just kill the ones who fall. It slowly kills the ones who stay standing too. There was a day, one of those days that get stitched into your skin like an invisible scar. It was raining hard outside, and the thunder sounded like stray bullets tearing through the sky. They brought in a young man with a wounded arm, bleeding more than he should have. The sheet covering him was already soaked, and he was trembling so much I thought he'd start hallucinating. But he smiled, and it broke me, because no one smiled in that place anymore. Only him, like he carried summer in his chest. That was the first time I felt something shift inside me. He looked at me, feverish, and tried to say my name. "Nora," said a nurse beside me, and he repeated it. Nora. But the way he said it It was like my name had color and warmth. That moment was so small and so eternal that I almost dropped the tray of instruments. And that's where my story begins. The one no one ever knew fully. The one I took decades to understand. With him, everything felt slower. I caught myself stitching his shoulder wound too slowly, like I didn't want the moment to end. I wasn't just trying to fix his skin. I wanted to fix everything. I wanted to erase the pain he didn't speak of, close the wounds that didn't bleed. Because he carried a quiet, old sorrow, like someone who had already buried too much love. I could see it in his eyes. And even there, in the middle of all that horror, something was born that never should have been. A forbidden love. I knew I couldn't. Nurses weren't allowed to get involved, especially not with wounded soldiers under our care. But that kind of thing, you don't choose it. You trip into it. And I tripped on a glance, a gesture, a sigh while he slept with a fever. I stayed past my shift just to watch over him, made up reasons to check his dressings, held his hand longer than necessary, until one night, he squeezed my fingers back, and in that silent exchange, I knew it was already too late. "Life, Nora," he whispered hoarsely one night, when the generator failed and we were left in candlelight. "Life still has color when you smile." I held on to that like gold, because in war, everything loses color, except what we feel. And what I felt for him was color, alive and burning in the middle of all that gray. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else noticed, if my eyes gave me away, if the other nurses saw how my hands trembled when he coughed up blood, or how I walked faster through the corridors just to check if he was still there. But no one ever said a word. And maybe that's why this wartime love lasted longer than it should have. Because it grew in silence, in the forbidden, in the space between "you're gonna be okay" and "please don't leave yet." Now, sitting here in this old trailer with the ticking clock louder than it should be, I understand it better. I understand we love the way we can, when we can. That not all love has to last to be real. Sometimes it just has to happen. A spark, a moment. And that's what he was to me. A spark in the middle of a minefield. Something so unlikely it had to be true. No one ever wrote our names in a letter. No one ever sang our story. But it happened. Like so many other stories locked in the drawers of forgotten heroines. Like so many women who held the world while the world ignored them. Like so many Noras, who loved in silence and carried secrets in boxes that only open when the soul is too tired to lie. I don't know if he remembers me. I don't know if he lived, if he loved again, if he survived the war out there, and the war he carried inside. But me? I never forgot. I never stopped hearing the sound of boots. And I never stopped smelling that mix of fresh blood, blue soap, and faded hope. Because some memories don't fade. And some loves, no matter how forbidden, no matter how lost, still exist. Every time the wind slips through the window and whispers, softly, his name inside my head. It wasn't the name itself. It was the way the word came out of his mouth, low, almost whispered, with that roughness of someone whose soul had already burned from the inside out. "Nora," he said, like he was calling for shelter. He didn't look straight at me, but I knew it was meant for me. I was changing the dressing on his shoulder, steady hands, heart racing, and he, feverish, trembling, and stubborn, like saying my name was the only medicine he had left. In that moment, everything changed. Until then, I was just a pair of trained hands. Hands that stitched up skin, gave morphine shots, and wiped away blood with a kind of precision no girl my age should have known. But when he called me like that, for the first time, I felt something shift. I felt that, to him, I was more than hands. I was someone. I was a woman. Do you understand what that means, sweetheart? To be seen like that in the middle of war. In the middle of the stench of death, the constant rush, the groans of pain and the absence of color. To be called by name with that kind of tenderness felt like hearing a violin in the middle of a bombing. It was such a small thing, almost invisible. But to me, it was everything. His fever was high that day. Sweat ran down his forehead like ghosts were chasing him. And they were. I knew. He dreamed out loud, cried out names in the night, whispered broken sentences. I heard him from my cot in the corner, when the war's noises paused and the sounds came from within. Sometimes he called out for Eli. And once, he cried in his sleep. I got up slowly, walked over to him, and wiped his face like a mother wipes her child's face. With care, with respect, and with pain. It was in that space between wakefulness and delirium that he saw me. Really saw me. After that Nora, he never called me nurse again, or ma'am. It was always just Nora. Even when others were around, even when it was too risky to let anyone notice something was different. But he didn't care. And I stopped caring too. We didn't talk much, but we did talk. Those quiet conversations full of pauses between words. Like we were scared of filling the air too much and being overheard. We talked the most during overnight shifts, and never about the war, never about the blood, the bodies, or the horror. We talked about food, about the smell of fresh bread, about the sound of rivers running through the mountains. We talked about our pasts, even if just in fragments. He said he liked emotional stories, and that I should write a book when the war was over. Little did he know, the book would be him. He didn't say much about his family. Just a brother, dead, probably, and a farm in Georgia no one took care of anymore. He said that right there, in the middle of all that chaos, I was the only place where the world felt a little less unfair. And me, I kept every word like they were seeds. And they grew in here, in my chest, before I even noticed. We didn't touch much. It was dangerous. All it took was one wrong look, one ill-timed comment, and I could be transferred, or worse. But the eyes spoke, and the hands, when they met for a second longer during the passing of a tool, said what our mouths couldn't. It was a forbidden love, the kind that only grows because it's forbidden, the kind that burns because it can't be. And yet, it was. One night he waited for me. I'd just finished my shift and had gone to the back of the tent to grab more gauze and soap. When I came back, he was sitting up, covered to the chest, his arm already healing. He looked serious. Didn't smile. He just said, "Your hair smells like blue soap." I laughed, told him it was the same soap I used on my sheets before the war. "I like that smell," he said. "Reminds me of home. Reminds me of you." That sentence froze something inside me. I stood there, holding the aluminum tray like it was a crystal glass. I remembered my mother saying wartime love was fleeting, that men clung to women like lifeboats in a shipwreck. But he didn't treat me like something to cling to. He treated me like solid ground, like a good memory, like warmth in a world that was freezing over. The next night he was worse, not because of the wound. It was healing fine. But because of the nightmares. He'd sit up suddenly, sweating, talking to ghosts. I sat at the edge of his makeshift bed and touched his forehead. He whispered, "If I die, will you remember my name?" And with a knot in my throat, I said, "If I forget, my heart will remind me." He closed his eyes and slept. After that, I started writing. Little sentences, little memories. I grabbed wrapping paper, scraps of boxes. anything I could use to record that quiet love. A wartime love, with no kisses in the square, no photos in frames, but just as real as any long marriage, and deeper than most. The morning he called me Nora for the second time. No fever, just that soft glow in his eyes. I knew I was lost. I knew it couldn't end well. That real life would come to collect its price. But I also knew, with a certainty I still carry, that it was love, that it was mine, and that, no matter who saw it or not, no matter that no one wrote our names down together, we were real. And that's why, even now, with fingers twisted by time, and bones begging for quiet, I still whisper his name at night, real soft. Nora, he said. And from that moment on, I was never just a nurse again. It was a simple smell, the kind that sticks to memory like an unresolved promise. Blue soap, bought in bars, the kind my mother used to scrub sheets in a zinc tub, back when the world still felt whole. I kept the habit, maybe out of superstition, maybe out of longing. I used to wash my cloths by hand, scrubbing hard like I could somehow scrub the pain out of the days. And that week, the smell changed. Not the soap itself, mind you. The air around it changed. There was something different tucked in the fold of my apron. A note, a trace, a memory that wasn't just mine. It was late afternoon. I had just hung some sheets on makeshift lines behind the barracks, when my hand brushed against a strange lump in my apron pocket. I thought it might be a forgotten handkerchief, maybe a crumpled gauze. But it was paper. A piece folded in four, worn at the corners, smelling of sweat, soap, and some quiet urgency. I opened it gently. The letters trembled on the page like they'd been written in fear. You're the only place where I still feel whole. That was it. No signature, no time, no name. But I knew. I knew instantly. The body knows before the mind does. It was him, my wartime love. That green-eyed man who said Nora, like he was calling for salvation. It felt like he'd written it with his skin, and I shook all over. Shook so much I had to sit down on the rock next to the sewing tent. The paper in my hands felt like an ember, and inside me, everything caught fire. It wasn't just a letter, it was a hidden confession, a risk taken. Because writing, in that situation, was almost as dangerous as deserting. It left a trail. It meant admitting there was something more. More than the pain, more than the rules, more than our assigned roles in that theater of death. It meant putting into words what no one dared say out loud, that even among the screams, the shrapnel, the piled-up bodies, there was still room for love. A forbidden love, of course, because everything about it was. Forbidden by the uniform, by the silence expected from us nurses, by the constant fear of being transferred, reported, erased. But there it was, tucked between soap and gauze, the proof that the longing I felt every time he fell asleep, facing away, wasn't mine alone. He felt it too. He also carried in his chest a flame the war couldn't put out. From that day on, I started keeping everything I could. The note, of course, was carefully refolded and hidden in a false bottom of my bandage kit. Then came other signs, small, subtle, almost invisible to anyone not living with a heart on fire. A strand of his hair that got caught in the pillowcase. A dried petal I found under his cot, which, I swear to God, I don't know where it came from. But it felt like he'd placed it there on purpose. Even the sound of his breathing at night. I started collecting it in my memory. It was like living a secret love story. Like time had folded in on itself, and by some miracle 2 souls had found each other where no meeting should have been possible. I felt like I was inside one of those old black and white films, where the lovers never touch but say everything with their eyes. And that hurt, because loving in the dark is loving in halves. And still, I loved with my whole self. I remember I started walking more carefully. My steps got softer, like the ground might spill our secrets. The looks we shared grew deeper, more layered, more silent. A thick silence, like a veil. And even without new words, even without more notes, I knew he was still writing to me with his gestures. When he adjusted the blanket at his feet, when he left a spoonful of soup untouched, knowing I'd come to eat after my shift, when he pretended to sleep just to hear my voice say, "You're okay." My God, how real it all was. I don't know if other women saved these little scraps of love during wartime. Maybe they did, maybe not. But I know that, for me, every detail was an anchor. Me who'd always been practical, a daughter of the hard mountain folk, who never taught me to dream too big, suddenly found myself gathering gestures like flowers in a minefield. I became an accomplice to the impossible. Sometimes I think he wanted to say more, that he tried to but didn't have the means, that the note was his only way to breathe outside the pain. Because some things the mouth just can't bear to say. Only the hands can, or the eyes, or a crumpled piece of paper. And in that note, in that simple and almost raw phrase, was everything the war hadn't destroyed. Hope, tenderness, belonging. You're the only place where I still feel whole. I still whisper that sentence today, when the wind sneaks in and the rocking chair creaks. I whisper it softly, like lighting a candle for a soul still alive. Because being someone's place, being their home, their shelter, their anchor, that's bigger than love. That's being living memory. That's being the part that doesn't die. And he's still here. Even if the note has yellowed, even if the blue soap is long gone, even if the sheets today are machine-washed with scentless detergent, he's still here, in the spaces between the seams of time, in the wooden box I keep hidden, in the silence I still carry. And maybe, just maybe, there's more of him out there, more words tucked away, more clues left behind by trembling hands. Maybe that note was just the beginning of another discovery I haven't found the courage to make. Or maybe he's still trying to say something. I can't explain it exactly. But some eyes you carry with you forever. Not because of their color or shape, but because of the way they look at you when they think no one's watching. They were green, but not that bright green that sparkles. They were a deep green, like tall trees, in the middle of a forest, quiet, profound, full of stories no one else would ever know. His eyes never asked for anything, but they never hid either. And they always took a while to close. No matter how tired his body was, wounded on the edge of collapse, he fought off sleep. Like he didn't want to step away for even a second from what little reality he had left in that field hospital. And for a while, that reality was me. On the worst bombing days, when the corridors buzzed with voices and blood, I noticed how he followed me with his eyes. Even lying still on the cot, even with his arm still bandaged, he never stopped watching my steps. And there was something in that gaze, something that made me feel a little less invisible. Me, Nora, always too small, too plain, too unimportant. I became someone in the eyes of that man falling apart. It was like he was saying, "You still exist, and so do I." I remember clearly the day the war closed in. The higher-ups started saying soldiers who could walk were being sent back to the front, even if they weren't anywhere near healed. It was terrifying. Some couldn't even hold a spoon yet, and they were already being dragged back to hell. When he heard the news, he didn't say a word. He just looked at me, and that's when I understood. He knew our time was running out. that our brief hidden wartime love was about to be crushed by the general's merciless clock. He pretended not to care, joked around with the other soldiers. But his eyes, oh, those eyes grew darker each day, like every blink was a practice goodbye. And me? I did everything I could to hold on to the routine. I washed, I stitched, I cleaned. I pretended too. But inside, with every hour that passed, my heart broke a little more. It was on a rainy night, one of those when the infirmary tent feels like it's about to fly off, that he called for me. He didn't shout, just said Nora, like he was asking for forgiveness through my name. When I got close, he was already sitting up, sweating cold, eyes too wide. The fever had come back, or maybe it was just fear. That fear men feel when they know they're about to leave behind what they love the most. I sat next to him, took his hand tight, and he gripped it like it was the last solid thing he had in this world. "If I could," he started, then stopped. He didn't need to finish, but he did anyway. "If I could, I'd take you out of here, somewhere with no war, no orders, where neither God nor generals ruled, just us. And maybe a dog." I laughed. Those words were so absurd, and yet so necessary. Like a boy inside him had slipped out for a moment, trying to imagine a future where this, us, wasn't a sin, wasn't forbidden, wasn't impossible. I wanted to say yes, wanted to say, let's go, like a girl at the last chapter of a love story. But right there, in the middle of fear, with my apron stained in blood and my hands trembling, all I could whisper was, "I know." And in that "I know" was everything. The pain, the longing, the surrender, the impossibility. The rain got stronger, and the generator died. We were left in the dark for a few seconds, with just one lamp flickering in the corner of the tent. And there, like time froze, just for the two of us, he kissed me. It wasn't a movie kiss, no soundtrack, no perfect backdrop. It was urgent, tense, full of fear and want and sorrow. And still, it was the truest kiss of my life. His lips tasted like old coffee and salt. His hands were warm, even wounded. And his embrace. It was a goodbye. I knew right away. We didn't need words. That kiss was our silent farewell, and it lasted the time of a falling tear. After that, he lay down slowly, pulled the blanket up to his chest and turned his face to the side, but his eyes stayed open, and I sat there, watching him, waiting, hoping he'd fall asleep, because if he slept, maybe there'd still be time. But he didn't sleep. He stayed there for hours, eyes half open, staring into nothing, like he was trying to etch my face into his memory, like he wanted to take me with him, even though he couldn't. And I let him. I let him look at me, let him drink me in with those sad, love-filled eyes, because I wanted to keep that moment too, that emotional story no one would ever tell, because it was ours alone, made of silences, soft touches, and promises we could never fulfill. That night I understood what my grandmother meant when she talked about beautiful pain love. That's what he was to me. Beautiful. And aching. Like a flower blooming in the middle of asphalt. And that's why, even now, so many years later when I close my eyes in this quiet little trailer, I still see his, still open, still holding on, still alive. Because when you love like that, against the current of life, the other person never really closes their eyes inside you. Sunday. I remember it clearly because it was a Sunday. Sundays during the war had a bittersweet taste, like reheated coffee you drink out of habit, not because it brings any joy. They were a bit quieter, with fewer boots stomping, fewer screams in the halls, as if even war itself paused to catch its breath before tearing open a new wound on Monday. I was in the mess hall, cleaning a bowl with an old damp cloth. The blue soap didn't even lather anymore. But the gesture mattered more than the outcome. That's what kept me going. Those little rituals. Across the room, one of the nurses was fiddling with the radio. It usually just gave off static, but that day, it caught. Immediate battalion withdrawal from the Eastern Zone. Unit 314 will be relocated in the next few hours. My spine froze. I knew that number like it was etched into my skin. Unit 314. It was his. My green-eyed soldier. The one who wrote the note. The one I missed. The one whose rushed kiss still burned in the corners of my mouth. The radio didn't say anything else. Just that. Then it slipped back into static, like it had already said too much. My first reaction was no reaction. I kept scrubbing the bowl, like that would protect my heart from the collapse looming inside. But my hands started trembling. And then the cloth fell. A nurse asked if I was okay. I nodded. Lying had become a survival reflex. I was fine, yes, just a little tired. But inside something was crumbling, because the news came before the words, before him, before any explanation, goodbye or plan. The radio, cold and impersonal, stole from me the right to hear it from his own mouth. It stole time. It stole the ground beneath me. It stole my chance to say, stay, even knowing he couldn't. Minutes later, he came through the side door of the mess hall. He was pale, paler than usual, shoulders low, steps hesitant, and eyes that wouldn't meet mine, because he knew seeing me would hurt. When our eyes finally locked, it felt like a thread deep inside me was being pulled, and that thread was what kept me standing. He sat in front of me without saying a word, and I didn't either. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours, the kind of silence that only exists between two people who've said all they could, and still have so much left to say. He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed hard, and finally said, "They're sending me today. Today. Not tomorrow. Not soon. Not maybe. Today." That's when I understood there wouldn't be a letter. No promise, no formal goodbye. Nothing beyond what we had already lived. In the glances, in the in-betweens, in the looks no one else ever noticed. I got up before the tears could fall. I went to the back of the yard, near the ambulances. The sky was heavy, like it knew what was coming. I sat on a wooden crate, hugged my knees, and waited. For what? I wasn't sure. Maybe for a miracle, that he'd change his mind, that the general would forget his name, or that the radio had lied, but he came. And he came fast. The time between the announcement and his departure was as short as a single breath. He stopped in front of me. His coat was draped over his shoulders, his arms stronger now, but still bandaged. In his eyes, there was no anger, no panic, just resignation. The kind only those who've truly loved understand. The kind that accepts what can't be changed. What life takes from you even when you've given it everything. "I won't be able to write to you," he said. "They won't let me." I nodded. "But if you keep this..." He pulled a small wooden box from his pocket. "Maybe it won't hurt as much." I took it with both hands. It was light, cold, and full of a warmth that had no explanation. "Thank you," I whispered. He looked at me for a second longer. Then, as if time had finally won the battle against us, he pulled me into a hug. The kind of hug that doesn't ask for anything. No explanations, no future, just presence in the now. Hugs like that only happen when love is too big for words. The ground was wet. The tarp on the ambulance flapped in the wind. The smell of damp earth and burning fuel filled my nose. And still, in that moment that passed too quickly, I knew he was mine, and that He never would be. He climbed into the ambulance without looking back. The radio was still hissing when it pulled away. I stayed there, still, with the box in my hands, with pain in my chest, and with the certainty that, in war, death isn't the worst part. It's what you lose before it. It was that Sunday, in the noise of the radio and the silence of his goodbye, that I understood. There are emotional stories that don't end with a happy ending, but they're still love stories. War love, forbidden love. Love you feel, with every part of your body, even if it only lasts a few days. And I lived it. And the radio was only the beginning of the silence that would come next. It was small, smaller than a pocketbook. The edges were worn, the latch was plain brass, and it smelled old, even when it was still new. When he placed it in my hands, right in the rush of his departure, I could barely react. The box was wrapped in a piece of his coat, that same coat he wore even on warm days, as if the weight of the buttons was what kept him standing. For when you need to remember, it was real. That's all he said. And then he vanished into the dust and sirens. For a while, I couldn't even touch it. I left it buried at the bottom of my trunk, tucked between socks and unfinished crochet, like some kind of war artifact too powerful to open. Like it could tear open wounds I wasn't ready to face. Because knowing he'd left, that pain I could survive. But opening the box? That was different. That meant facing the fact that maybe he was never coming back, and that what little we had left was in there. That first week, I hid it, like someone hiding a sin or a relic. On quiet nights, after everyone had either fallen asleep or drowned their ghosts in tin flasks, I'd look at it. Just look. I never touched it, just waited. Like I was waiting for a sign it was finally safe to remember. But the memories, oh, they came before the permission. They came in the smell of soap on the sheets, in the warmth left behind in my cot, in the way my name echoed in my chest. Nora, 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 as if he were still whispering it. It took years for me to work up the courage to open it completely. I came back to the Appalachians with little more than a spare dress, an apron stained beyond saving, and the box. Life went on in a strange way, because when you love like that, with no time, no chance, no witness, the world after feels kind of black and white. I tried to feel whole again. Got involved with a soft-spoken man, clean hands, said I was beautiful even with my scars. But he wasn't him. None of them ever were. And the box stayed. Stayed between the blankets, among the objects no one understood, and I never explained. No one ever asked. No one ever knew. I was just a simple woman, a retired nurse, a neighborhood seamstress who cooked well and laughed rarely. But at night, I slept with that box beside my bed, like someone sleeping with a secret. And that's what it was. The embodiment of a forbidden love, lived between gauze and gunfire, between whispered kisses and unsaid goodbyes. When I finally opened it, it was an autumn afternoon. The kind of afternoon when the sun tilts through the window and everything feels slower. My knees ached. The radio hissed softly in the background, and I realized, if I didn't open it that day, I might never open it. I picked up the box with both hands, sat in the rocking chair, and took a deep breath. The latch clicked gently, and that sound alone almost made me cry. Inside, 3 things. The first was a worn coin, one of those old copper ones you barely see anymore. One side was corroded, and on the back, a date, 1942. That was the year he lost his brother. I remembered. He'd told me once in a fever haze. Said his brother always kept a coin in his pocket, for luck. That one. Must have been his. And now it was mine. The second thing was a blurry photograph. so faded you could barely make it out. But I recognized him, standing beside a fence, no uniform, smiling. A small, shy smile, like someone not used to being photographed. The edges were frayed, and the eyes, even unfocused, still had that deep green that cut right through me. I pressed my cheek to the photo, and I cried, like it was a funeral, but without a body, because love that disappears without goodbye becomes grief that never ends. And the third thing, a handkerchief, my handkerchief, faded, still marked with faint stains of soap and dried blood. I used to wear it in my hair on the hottest days. He used to tease me, saying the red in it looked like a flower blooming on a battlefield. And there it was, kept, folded just the way I used to fold it, like he'd taken a piece of me with him, like that was the only way to keep me close. I held the handkerchief to my chest, and I understood. The box wasn't just a keepsake, it was a testimony, a reminder that, yes, it all happened, that I was loved, that he was real, that our wartime love, so small against the size of the world, was too big to fit into any word, and that even though it never had an ending written down, it never truly ended inside me. Today the box is still here. It sits on the top shelf, beside old cookbooks I can barely read anymore. No one in the family knows what it means. They think it's just another one of Grandma's trinkets. And I let them. Because some things have to stay hidden to keep their beauty whole. And because every time I touch it, I feel the weight of all the things we never said out loud. It's strange what waiting does to us. At first it hurts. Then it shapes you. And in the end, it becomes routine. I spent months waiting for something that maybe was never even promised. But that didn't matter. The heart clings to crumbs when it loves in the dark. And mine, oh, mine lived off the hope that somewhere he was waiting for me too. I remember those first days after he left. The tent felt bigger, the sounds sharper, every step heavier. His absence wasn't just physical. It changed the air itself. It was like someone had taken the only right note out of the offbeat song that was war. And I stayed there, stitching, serving soup, smiling with my eyes. But nothing fit anymore. So I started counting the days. Not with marks on the wall like in the movies, but with heartbeats. Each morning without news was a scar that didn't bleed, but throbbed. And what kept me going was the hope that he'd write. A line, maybe two. A note like the one he left in my apron. Something to say. I'm alive. I still think of you. And that's when I began a kind of silent ritual. Waiting for the mailman. He came once a week, sometimes twice. A thin man, crooked hat, always wearing a wrinkled uniform. Never talked much. But I watched him from the window, like I was waiting for a miracle. Every time he showed up with that leather satchel on his shoulder, my heart threw a party. I'd hurry to the infirmary door, trying to mask my nerves with silly questions. Anything for me? Or, did something come from Georgia today? He'd shake his head, almost always with a polite smile, the kind men learn to give when they don't know what to say to a sad woman. The first week, it was understandable. The second, bearable. By the third, it began to cut deep, because no answer, sweetheart, is also an answer. And it has the driest sound of all, silence. Still I waited, every time. Some nights I even dreamed he'd show up, covered in dust, holding a crumpled letter with my name scribbled in shaky ink. Other nights the dreams were worse. He'd come, but with no eyes, no mouth, just a body without a soul, like the war had swallowed the man and left only his shadow. And even then, I waited, until one day the mailman stopped coming. They said he was transferred. Others said he got sick. Nobody really knew. But the fact was, the man who brought me nothing stopped bringing even his own presents, and that was the final blow. Because when even the messenger disappears, you understand that your story's been filed away in time. Back then there was no internet, no phone access for folks like me. Everything was slower, more analog, more cruel. And it was in that void that my wartime love dissolved. No letter, no word, no closure. He simply vanished. Later, much later, a nurse who'd been relocated told me, with almost no emotion in her voice. Some of the soldiers from 314 were sent to no-return zones. Others deserted. Some died without names. She spoke like she was reading off index cards. But every sentence was a nail in the coffin of what little faith I had left. I asked about him. She didn't know. Nobody knew. It was like he'd been erased. And that's what hurts the most. Because a love that dies, you can bury it. But a love that disappears, it haunts you. And that's what he became for me. A sweet ghost. A silent shadow that lives in the margins of my memories. And even without a letter, without a trace, without a grave, he's still here. Now, with almost 90 years behind me, sometimes I still find myself looking toward the gate of my trailer when I hear a mail truck. It's automatic. I know he's not coming. I know the letter's not coming. The mailman's not coming. And still, a part of me lifts her head, like someone who still believes in miracles, because that forbidden love never had a funeral. And love without a funeral doesn't turn into the past. It turns into waiting. It turns into pause. It turns into a question. No one ever asked me if I was waiting for someone. Not my family. Not the few friends who stuck around. Maybe they thought I was just some old spinster, lost in her own world. But no, I was a woman on watch, like so many other forgotten heroines who loved in silence and were forced to pretend they moved on. The truth is, I never needed many words. One letter would have been enough. One line. And I'm alive. Even a goodbye. But his silence, that was the loudest thing I've ever heard. And that's why, even today, when I see an older man crossing the street with a certain way of walking, big hands, deep eyes, I stop. I watch. I wait. Because you never know. Maybe one day some letter just got lost on its way and is only a few decades late. Over time, memory starts to fail. Names blur. Faces lose shape. Dates slip through your fingers like sand. But the body... Oh, the body has a more stubborn kind of memory. The body remembers what the mind can't bear to carry. And these hands, these wrinkled hands you see here, covered in raised veins and sunspots, these hands know everything. They know where it hurt. They know who bled more. They remember the texture of his skin, warm, rough in some places, paper thin where the war had taken pieces of him. They still know the direction of the scars on his shoulder, the exact spot where the wound would tug whenever he took a deep breath. They remember the shape of the bone beneath the gauze, the rhythm of his pulse when the fever spiked. These hands, my dear, these hands never forgot. Even after caring for hundreds of other wounded men, even after decades of patching up other people's lives, scrubbing floors, knitting hope through harsh winters, his touch stayed, trapped here between the calluses and the lines of time. A private map, a kind of secret you don't write on paper, but that hides in the skin. Back in the war, my fingers were steady. I could stitch fast and clean with machine-like precision. But with him, I always took my time, not because I lacked skill, but because I needed to. I wanted time to stretch. I wanted every pass of the thread to be a way to keep him here for just a few seconds longer. When I cleaned the dressing on his arm, My fingers moved in soft little circles, like an apology for the pain. And he closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to feel. I knew he was present in the touch, that in that almost maternal, almost lover, almost confession kind of touch, there was something no one else needed to understand, because it was just ours. After he left, my hands grew restless. I scrubbed sheets harder. I embroidered non-stop, crocheted like the world would end if I stopped. It was a desperate attempt to quiet what they were screaming, because even as his face began to fade in my mind, my body remembered he had existed, and it remembered exactly how it felt to hold him. Sometimes in the middle of the night I'd wake up with my hand stretched out into the emptiness, like I was reaching for him in the dark. Like maybe, somewhere in the room, his chest was still rising and falling. And in those moments, I'd close my eyes and let myself drift. I'd touch my own arm, the way I remembered touching his, and I'd cry softly, just enough to dampen the pillow, quietly, because no one understands this kind of longing. Only those who've had love ripped away without warning. Years later, I went back to nursing. At a nursing home this time, caring for old men who barely remembered their own names. And even there, among diapers, catheters, and bland soup, my hands kept searching for him. One day, one of the residents had a scar in the same spot, almost identical. When I went to change the dressing, my hands hesitated. It was nearly the same. The smell of his skin, the shape of his shoulder, the way he instinctively turned his head when I applied the antiseptic. I went cold. My legs shook. But it wasn't him. And still, my hands reacted like it was. These days, I barely do anything with them. Rheumatism came slowly, like everything else in old age. First, the fingers stiffened. Then, the wrists started to ache. Some mornings I can barely hold a teaspoon. Other days I drop the TV remote without realizing. But even so, even now, when I touch an old piece of fabric, or a tablecloth I've kept since the hospital days, they tremble differently, like they're whispering, "He was here." My grandkids laugh at my twisted hands. They say they look like a good witch's hands. I laugh too. But deep down I know they're the hands of someone who touched the impossible. Hands that held nameless love. Hands that wove an emotional story between stitches and silences. Hands that carry a war-torn love no one saw. But that still pulses, still vibrates, still burns. No one knows that. No one needs to. Just me. And these hands. They were my accomplices, my witnesses, my altar. If one day someone opens my box of memories and finds a handkerchief, a coin, a worn photograph, maybe they won't understand. Maybe they'll think it's just old lady nostalgia. But if they look closely at my hands, they'll see a kind of faith no words can hold. Because the body always knows, even when the mind has forgotten everything. And that's why every night, before I turn off the light in this trailer and let the rocking chair creak alone, I run my hands slowly across the bedsheet, like I'm searching, like I'm still waiting, and every now and then, I swear I feel his warmth again, because love like that, it doesn't go away. It just changes shape, and hands, oh, hands always remember. It was a Saturday. That I remember clearly. Saturdays at this age taste like stale bread and the low hiss of a TV left on just for company. I'd gone out to buy cornmeal and a ball of burgundy yarn, the kind I use when the cold starts tapping harder at the trailer windows. It was one of those days when the sky can't make up its mind. Gray, with a wind that feels like it's carrying questions. I walked into the small neighborhood store with my short list and my slow, dragging steps. I know every shelf by heart. I know where the canned goods are, where the soap is, where they keep the same beans I've been buying for years. But that day, something knocked the world off its axis. I was looking at the day-old bread when I felt it. I didn't see him first. I felt him. A familiar smell. Not perfume. Not soap. But something between worn coat warmth and the faint memory of warm metal from the field hospital. I turned my head slowly. And I saw him. A tall, older man. Thick grey hair. Still full. Cut short. Wearing a plaid shirt. Just like the kind men from Georgia used to wear. And his eyes. My God, those eyes. They were green. Not the kind of green full of youth and future. But that winter green. The same deep green I saw all those decades ago. Under the tarp. In the smell of blood and blue soap. My heart locked up. Literally. For a second, time folded in on itself. And I, 90 years old, was once again the nurse with steady hands. Nora, the one who heard her name whispered with longing and fear. My chest tightened so violently, I had to steady myself against the shopping cart. And he walked right past me, without seeing me, without recognizing me. And right there, in that instant, the world collapsed. Again. He wasn't him. Or maybe he was. But he didn't see me. He passed by like I was part of the scenery. Just some old woman hunched near the discount shelf. And I crumbled inside. The pain hit dry, like a cough you hold in out of embarrassment. I held it too. But I shook. Shook like the night he left and only left me the box. I went home without the cornmeal, without the yarn, without any strength in my legs. I walked in, took off my shoes, turned off the television that wasn't even really on, and went straight to the top shelf. I pulled down the box. That box. The little one. The one he gave me back when the world still didn't know what we were about to lose. I opened it with trembling hands. The coin was still there. The handkerchief, now so faded it looked made of mist. And the photograph. That blurred photo, where you can barely see anything. But still I pressed it to my chest. And I cried. I cried like I'd just lost him a second time. Because that man, that stranger with familiar eyes, gave me hope, if only for a second. Hope that maybe he had survived, that he had come back, that he had looked for me, even if he didn't know where to start. But I also cried for something else, for becoming unrecognizable, for being now, invisible, even to the one who once said I was the only place where he still felt whole. Old age does that to you. You disappear before you die. They see us in the aisles, on park benches, at the grocery store checkouts. But they don't see us. They don't see the story in our wrinkles, the war tucked behind our eyes, the love that didn't fit inside its time. We're just shadows, leftovers. And still, we keep loving. We keep waiting. That night I sat in the rocking chair and stared at the reflection in the window. Not mine. His. The one I imagined. The one I created. The one that might have been. And I wondered, did he ever think of me too? Did he ever, somewhere, see a small woman with a scarf in her hair and tired eyes, and feel his heart catch for just a moment? Because longing, my darling, is a question nobody ever answers. It's an echo that only comes back in dreams. We think we get over it, but we don't. We learn to carry it. We learn not to speak. We learn to silence their name even inside our own heads. But then a smell, a gesture, a pair of eyes, and it all comes rushing back. And that day, it came back. The whispered kiss, the crackling radio, the sound of boots in the hallway, the hidden note in my pocket. I fell back into my own past like someone walking through an abandoned house, and I realized the frame was still standing, even if everything inside had collapsed. After crying for what felt like hours, I did something I hadn't done in years. I placed the photograph, the coin, and the handkerchief on the table, like someone building an altar, like someone lighting a candle for a memory still alive. I sat there, staring, in silence, and I thought, if he's still out there, I hope he knows. I hope he knows I still keep it. I still remember. Because some wartime loves survive battles bigger than war itself. They survive time, and silence, and absence. And they stay right here, waiting for a gaze that might recognize us back. Sometimes I catch myself wondering about it, more than I probably should. I sit here in my rocking chair, the same one that creaks softly like an old door full of memory, and let my eyes drift through the foggy window. Outside, the world keeps going. Cars pass, leaves fall. The neighbor's dog barks at the same time every afternoon. But in here time doesn't move forward anymore. It folds, it loops, it comes back. Especially when the wind blows a certain way. And on those days, I wonder, what if he's still out there? I know it's foolish. Life's math is rarely kind to people our age. If he's survived, he must be old like me. White hair, slow steps, maybe a cane. Or maybe not. Maybe he died young, like so many did. Maybe he became just a name carved in stone. Or not even that. Maybe he was buried in the wrong place, with no one to say. He loved once. But what if... not? What if he built another life, with a woman who welcomed him, with children, grandkids, a dog that actually existed? What if on some random Sunday he's sitting on a porch somewhere, thinking about me with those same green eyes, just a little cloudier now? What if, deep in the pocket of some old forgotten shirt, he still keeps a dried flower petal or a faded handkerchief, like someone keeping a prayer? I wonder about these things without bitterness. There's no anger here. Just silence, a thick kind of silence, like the ones that followed the bombings, when everything went still and all you could hear was your own heartbeat, too loud inside your chest. It's just that some loves don't need presents. They feed off memory, off what could have been, off what was for a moment and stayed lit forever. And mine was like that, a forbidden love, born between scalpels, sirens, and sky stained with gunpowder. A love that came at the wrong time, or maybe the only time it could have come, because there, in the middle of death, we let ourselves feel alive. I never told anyone, not my sisters, not the neighbors who visit once a month, not even my granddaughter, who loves listening to my stories and keeps telling me I should write a book. How would I explain it? That my greatest love lasted only a few days, was sealed by a rushed kiss, and wrapped in a crackling radio. How do you say you've carried a man inside you all these years, even without knowing if he died or simply forgot? There's no place in today's world for loves like this. Loves with no photos, no letters, no endings. But I'm still here holding on. Every time the wind hits the window with that slow drag, and the TV hisses on Channel 2 that never tunes right, I feel him. I feel like he's near. Like he's whispering my name just like he did in the infirmary. Nora. And suddenly my name has color again. Smells like blue soap and hope. That's when I talk to him. Softly. I tell him how the world is. I tell him I still sew, even with my fingers failing. I tell him the handkerchief is still here. That the photograph faded, but his image lives on. Right here. In the space between my heart and my longing. And I tell him I still love him. Not with that young, anxious kind of love, full of urgency, but with a quiet love, a steady one, the kind that survives time and absence and even death. Sometimes I wonder, what if someone finds this story among my things? Maybe they'll think it's fiction, that some lonely old lady with thinning hair made up a wartime romance to fill her days. But it's not. It's all true. Every word, every touch, every silence. And if someone reads this, if someone makes it this far, I just hope they know. There was love here. There was love. Even in silence. Even forbidden. Even for such a short time. And if he's still out there, if one day he also writes about me, or whispers my name to some old memory, let him know. I was his home. Even if only for a few midnight shifts. Even if only between one bandage and the next. Even if the war took everything, there was still love, and that's enough. You know, time is life's way of helping us forget gracefully. But some things, even time can't erase. Some memories hide in the folds of silence, and only show up when the wind changes, or when the soul is too tired to lie. I spent most of my life guarding this story like a faded photo tucked inside my bra. A secret without a frame, but still alive. War taught me how to stitch skin. But love taught me how to stitch silence. And now, at this age when the body starts to say goodbye before the soul does, I wanted to tell it, not to make noise, but to leave a thread glowing in case someone, somewhere, is also sitting in the dark. These days, life is quieter. I have grandkids who call when they remember, a rocking chair that creaks when the wind picks up, and a shelf full of boxes only I know the meaning of. I still write now and then. On scraps, on napkins, on the backs of receipts. I still wait, a little. Not for him, I know time doesn't rewind, but for me, for the part of me that's just now learning how to breathe again. Thank you for listening this far. If you can, keep this story gently, like it's yours too, or share it with someone who's loved in silence and never had the courage to say it out loud. And if you'd like to stay close, subscribe to this little corner. Not because I asked, but because maybe the next story might belong to you too. We never really know how a forgotten memory might stitch together two hearts that were once too far apart. And thank you for staying until the end. You listened to me like no one ever has.